Thank you very much for that generous introduction. How many of you here, by show of hands, would say that there is something that you can specifically do to make this world a better place? Thank you. And how many of you, by show of hands, can also say that there is something that you can do to make this world the worst place to be? Thank you very much. Not too long ago, like most of you, I was woken up by what I have now come to see as another dark cloud that descended on this earth. The plight of refugees all over the world. This time, it was through the image of a little lifeless body. The boy who has now become to be described as the little boy in a red t-shirt and blue pants. That boy's name, Elan Kurdish. He'd been washed off on the shore when his mother and his brother Khalid and himself were trying to cross over to go and find a better life, running away from Syria. As a mother to two boys myself, I tried very much to protect my kids so that they could not see the horror that I had just seen on television. So I said to myself, what can I do in this world to make a difference? Seeing one little lifeless body of a 3-year-old child washed on that beach, that is too many. As I watched every politician that we could think of debate this issue and look through the little crystal ball of will I get many votes if I decide that we are going to bring many people from Syria to my country? Will I be the next president again if I say that I'm going to bring more people from Syria into my country? And I thought to myself, just like one of the refugees that I had helped here in Australia, tell me, she said to me at one time, Mahongo, in my country, we had a better war. And I said, what do you mean, a better war? What makes one war better than another war? She said, you see, in the Congo, when the war happened between 1994 and 2003, people were killed, but my entire family was not killed. I think that's a better war. And I said, in comparison to which war? Then she said, my husband is from Rwanda. When the genocide happened in Rwanda in 1994, his entire family was killed. He was only 11 years old. He had to jump over many bodies like many people did in Rwanda to try and run away from that war as he ran off to Kenya. Within 90 days, 1 million people had been murdered in Rwanda. This was a war between the Hutus and the Tutsis, a very nasty war. And she said, Mahongo, I still think that my war was better than my husband's war. Because from the time he was 11 years old, he grew up with no parents, with no siblings, with no uncles, with no aunties. Lived in a refugee camp in Kenya for 18 years. Until the Australian government decided that they would give him, and his wife was from the Congo, an opportunity to come here. And I thought to myself, what do you do with people that have done that to you? How do you make them pay for this? And she said to me, Mahongo, you don't make them pay for this. You forgive them. I said, forgive them? I find it very hard to forgive someone even for the simplest act. And yet you have decided to forgive all those people that have done that to you. And I thought to myself, when it comes to looking at the issue of refugees, most of us, it's very easy to condemn them, to judge them, and to call them names. And I see this as a world that is made up of cake people and kendo people. The cake people are the people that look at the world as if it were a cake. You take a piece, and I take a piece. And some people take that piece at the expense of others. The kendo people are the people that say, if I get my little candle and light your candle, and light your candle, and light your candle, there is going to be more light in this room than if I just stood trying to protect my little candle. And I told myself, I want to be a candle person. So when the refugees came here to Australia, most of them had only gone up to year 2 of their education, because in a refugee camp, there is absolutely no education whatsoever. And I said to myself, what is it that I can do to help? And I remember one woman walking into a classroom that when I was delivering a session. She had 3 boys with her. And I said to her, I'm not sure if we can have you here, because this classroom is supposed to be a child-free classroom. And she said to me, Mahongo, I lost my only husband in a war in Rwanda. And I have come here to Australia. I didn't come here because I chose to come to Australia. And I thought to myself, refugees don't run to, they run from. And she said to me, I don't want to live here as if I came here to just beg people for things. I want to work for whatever I can work for and be the role model to my kids. Can you help me find a job? She could hardly speak any English. And I knew what a challenge it was going to be for me to convince the employer here in Darwin to employ this woman who had no English, no driver's license. And I said, first of all, we need to get you a driver's license. Why don't you go and do some driving lessons? She said, Mahongo, I have already been to see a driving instructor. When I got there, this man told me I am too dumb to learn to drive a car. And I said to her, I want you to go back to that man, look him in the eye and tell him, if I already knew how to drive a car, do you think I would come to you to learn how to drive a car? People go to learn things because they don't know. I want you to teach me how to drive a car because I don't know. But I'm going to live here in Australia, maybe for the rest of my life. And if I don't learn how to drive a car, I may never be able to get this job to feed my kids. And I said to her, if that man says no, you tell him, that's fine, you go and find another driving instructor. 6 months later, as I was driving on the streets of Darwin, I saw this woman driving a car. And I tried to wave at her. That was the woman that I had said to go and find a driving instructor. Then the next part was to find her a job. And I found an employer, and the employer said, Mahongo, they need to be able to speak English. Mahongo, they need to be able to do this. And I said to that employer, if I told you that this woman does not have perfect English, but she's got great potential to do this job, she may not be able to have a great conversation with you, but she can do this job, would you give her an opportunity? That employer said, maybe we could try. And I took her for this job interview after grooming her, but I forgot to tell her to turn her mobile phone off. So as she sat through that interview, her phone went off, and there was a very funny song playing on that phone. Fortunately, the employer ignored that and helped this woman get a part-time job. And she said, Mahongo, that's not enough. I said, if you want a job that will pay you more, maybe we need to look at getting you into some training so you can have a qualification to work in that industry. So this woman said, yes, send me to school. And I enrolled her in a Certificate 3 in disability. And one day she came to me after 12 months, waving a piece of paper in her hands. And she said, Mahongo, guess what? I am now qualified to work in disability. She was holding her Certificate 3 in disability services. And I told her as well, you know, go to your employer and tell that employer that now you have a certificate to work full-time if they wanted to give you a job. A few months later, she came back to my office and said, Mahongo, guess what? Today, I have been made a full-time employee of that company. That woman has taught me that each one of us can choose to either be cake people or candle people. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how many times you've spent, like condemning other people. You can decide to make that big difference. I love to hear about people that have made a difference, like Mother Teresa, a nun who had nothing, but so rich of love. The woman who taught us that you could love without wanting to be loved, that you could forgive even if you have not been forgiven. The woman who also taught us that you could understand other than seek to be understood. And I also like to think of someone who most of us would only have known through the Nobel Prize, Alfred Nobel. Alfred Nobel had invented dynamite. 8 years before he died, some people had predicted his death. That time it was his brother, Ludwig, that had died. So people wrote an obituary instead about Alfred Nobel. And they said this man was a merchant of death. This man had killed so many people through the dynamite he invented. When Nobel read that obituary of himself, he said to himself, is this how people will remember me? I didn't create dynamite to kill people. I created dynamite for the purpose of mining. But if this is the legacy that people will remember me for, as someone who was a merchant of death, I want to change this by contributing 94% of my wealth to a prize that will be called Nobel Prize, where people will be given an award for making a difference to this world. Even if he knew that the legacy earlier of the image of himself that people had was not as good, this time he decided he would turn it around. Will you light a candle for someone today? I want to spend 1 minute just to remember Elan Gadash, the boy in the red t-shirt and the blue pair of pants. Will you spend that 1 minute to light